We now move to policy revisions on second reading. Item 6.09, display of flags, Code IS.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the second reading for this policy. The comments received during the 30-day public comment period will be provided to the Board of Education and posted on the AACPS Policies and Regulations webpage on June 26, 2023. So I pass it over to Grace Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Bagel. Again, for the record, Grace Wilson, Legislative and Policy Specialist for the school system. Policy IS, display of flags, is before you on second reading. As a reminder, the purpose of this policy is to provide for the display of flags on Board of Education and property and in Anne Arundel County Public School facilities, including the display of flags for instructional purposes. There were 1,689 public comments received during the public comment period. Those were shared with you today and posted online on the Legislative and Policies Office website. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have regarding this policy.
Okay, again, I'm going to go around in our roll call order, and I will remind members, first round is for questions, second round is for comments or additionally as needed. So, Ms. Corkadell.
No questions, but I may have comment.
Ms. Schulheim.
No questions, but I do have a variety of amendments to make at the appropriate time.
Ms. Dent.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. McGrath.
No questions at this time.
Mr. Silkworth.
I have no questions. I do have a comment or two.
Ms. Frank. Ms. Ellis. Okay, so we'll do the second round, and I have no questions either. Ms. Corkadell.
I will reserve for any amendments, and then if there are no amendments, I will make a statement. I'm going to hold off until we get through some of that.
Okay. Ms. Schulheim.
Yes, thank you. I have a bunch of amendments. I am sending them to Diane as we speak. So just give me a minute to do that. But I will say that this, my amendments I'm bringing to you, I thank Ms. Wilson for her endless patience, and to our board council, both of whom, while no endorsements of any of what's going to go on were made, they helped steer me clear of some pitfalls legally and otherwise. So I really appreciate them for that. All right, so this is coming to you, Diane, for everyone. So we'll just start up at the top. I think I have to take these one at a time, although I do see this as all of them needing our attention. So we'll start with under purpose. And like I said, you'll get this in a second, but you can refer to board docs in the interim while we wait for it to get to you. Under purpose, I move to strike the phrase at the end of that first sentence that says, including the display of flags for instructional purposes from the purpose of the policy. So that's my first motion.
Okay. So we have a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Corkadell, I see your light.
I am reluctant to do any deliberation or debate not having anything in front of me. And I think to continue to proceed until such time that we do would not be appropriate. Because, I mean, we're talking about, unless I guess, memorized the draft, I would have really no way of placing it without seeing it first.
It's on board docs, and then it was shared via normal channels, and it was just sent to Diane to be reshared with you through email at this very moment. So it should be coming to you very shortly.
I still I'm going to have to delay as the first person in because I haven't even pulled this up. I did not receive an email citing that there were amendments or any new amendments posted to the board docs, except what was delivered by Ms. Howe last week. So this sounds different than what is being discussed here. So
Should we take a brief recess?
No, I don't think we need to, because she can look on board docs under, as we wait for this, as we wait for the email that's coming to her, and she can look at the purpose and note that I'm
Okay, here we
moved
go.
and have seconded the, yeah, oh, good, it just got here.
It's here.
got
can
like
look at it
20
now.
things up here. Okay.
This was also shared through normal channels.
I guess this is the first email I'm just receiving right now about it. So I don't believe, wanna do that? I mean, you can go and take other people as long as I'm allowed to come back to it, I suppose. Because if we're taking this, my understanding is we're not, or if we're taking this in pieces instead of in whole, then what I'm looking at.
Dr. Tobin, I was advised by council that we needed to do this piecemeal, so like, I would take the whole thing. I mean, I'll just amend
No,
the motion otherwise.
I am just asking for some clarification on the motion because it was not in front of me when it was spoken.
Could you repeat the motion, Ms.?
All right, now that it's in front of everyone, I will repeat again that under purpose, I would move to strike the last 8 words of the first sentence, starting with the word including. So that entire phrase, including the display of flags for instructional purposes, I have moved and has been seconded to strike. That's what we're debating.
Okay.
In general, I'm just going to say there's a lot of additions of the word decorations. And I believe a flag is different than a discussion on decorations, so I will not be supporting.
Point of order, we're talking about the purpose first. That was the motion that I made and was seconded, to strike just the end of that first sentence under purpose, the words including the display of flags for instructional purposes.
This is my time to speak, is it not?
All right.
I don't understand this sort
The
of
motion-
parliamentary procedure
The
here.
motion, as I understand it, that has been introduced and seconded is to strike and again, this is being taken in sections.
Oh,
right?
no, I had already accepted that explanation. I have it in front of me. I just made a comment, and I'm getting retorted in the middle of my time to speak about the amendment.
Okay.
And I do not believe it is appropriate. I do not believe it follows our processes and procedures. If I have a question for the motion author, amendment author, I will ask it. I am entitled to my opinion without being retorted in the middle of my statements. This is just...
So please continue, Ms. Corkadone.
I don't have any further comments except for to reiterate perhaps what I had said before I was interrupted. That's intimidating. The word decorations is separate from flags. And decorating the classroom is what we do to support education. And I am not going to be supporting things that are associated with decorations. We are here to discuss the display of flags. And although I personally don't think that the two should be discussed together or deliberated together. And so I will be a no on these.
Okay, thank you. I see no other lights. Oh, Mr. McGrath?
I just wanted to say, while I disagree with the policy, I do not agree with the large amount of amendments. If we are here just to vote down the policy, I feel like it would be a respect of everyone's time just to skip all these amendments and just go straight to a vote, personally. That's just my opinion on the matter.
Well, just a reminder, Mr. McGrath, we're not voting on the policy tonight.
I understand. I'm just,
Okay.
that's my idea.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Frank?
Yes, in looking at this, the piece that would be struck would be including the display of flags for instructional purposes. And I absolutely think that what we are supposed to be doing in this building should always lead to instructional purposes. So I will be voting against this amendment.
Okay. All right, I will say, I see no other lights before we vote. I will just say that as I've been thinking about this and reading the comments, I do not feel that this is a policy, frankly, that is needed. I think we're covered when it comes to the display of the flags that we were legally required to display on the one hand by the policy that covers that, and we're covered on the other in the policy that prevents us from displaying signs of hate. And so I similarly do not wish to entertain a lot of amendments to this policy. Mr. McGrath, I saw your light go back on.
I just want to say I concur with what you were saying.
Okay. All right, so Mrs. Frank.
I respectfully disagree. While I don't agree with Ms. Schalheim's amendment, I believe that she has the right to introduce this amendment and any others that she so chooses.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
As we all do.
All right, thank you. I see no more lights.
Actually, doesn't it come back to
Oh,
me?
I
So motion
apologize,
to-
Ms.
Thank
Schalheim.
you. Yeah, so one thing, we're going to take these paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, because that's, if I could do it all in one, I certainly would. I was told I couldn't. But I do have to say, and board counsel can corroborate this, that it was after some back and forth that the decision to expand upon the title of the policy was his recommendation, and I took it. So there's that. But yeah, I would like to go through all of them. Spent a lot of time on them, went both with staff and board counsel. And if we're going to talk about this policy, which you know I disagree with in full, then we can sit here and talk about amendments, none of which help student achievements.
Okay, thank you. All right. Ms. Dent, you have a...
Madam Chair, I'd like to get some clarity. I'm looking at what's on board doc, but for the public, and because I want transparency, what's displayed here and what's displayed in the public. Earlier, we were talking about the word decoration, and there was just some concern about the word decorations wasn't on the one that was being publicized. So I would just like clarity on the motion that is on the floor. It just talks about the last portion of the purpose, but it's also the words decoration has been modified in that purpose. So I think that for the clarity, no, I'm talking,
Shh, please.
so I'm simply stating that for the public, that what Mrs. Corkadale was discussing was what is not visibly displayed. So I wanted clarity about it so that there would be no further confusion about the policy. That's what I was trying to get to.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dent. Ms. Corkadell?
I guess I appreciate that we use a system that allows us to review things prior to our meetings, but I do not understand why the proposed amendments, as we're going through them, cannot be displayed on the screen right now, because they are being entered into the record. And there's a lot of people who I believe would like to follow along, especially if we're being asked to make a decision on such important issues that were important enough to bring a lot of people on a Monday night. I don't know if it actually ended up raining or not, but I don't understand why we can't put this up.
My understanding is that's a technical question, but
There's a Word version. If they remove the review comments on there, it could be scrolled to follow along just like I am right now.
I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute recess while we work this out, because I don't want to get stuck up here spending too much time figuring this out. So I'm going to call a recess. Okay. So I'm going to remind everyone of the process we always follow, which is that motions which emerge in a meeting are read. What is available to the public is the original policy as it was to be reviewed. And so the motions come at the meeting. They are not available to the public ahead of time, and it is not our practice, and for technical reasons, it's not a practical practice to also put the motions up in front of the public. That is, you can look back at our other meetings. That is how we have operated. So I would like to move forward. When we recessed, we had a motion before us. We had a second. We had heard back from, after all the questions, the motion maker, and that is usually the moment at which we then take a vote. So we have a quorum here, and I believe, seeing no more lights, that we are ready for a vote on the motion that was in front of us. Ms. Howe.
Thank you. Ms. Schallheim moved to amend A purpose, in quotes, to provide for the display of flags and decorations on Board of Education of Anne Arundel County board property and in any Anne Arundel County Public Schools AACPS facility while schools are in session, period.
Okay. Ms. Howe.
Ms. Corkadell.
No.
Ms. Schallheim.
Aye.
Ms. Dent.
Aye.
Mr. McGrath.
Nay.
Mr. Silkworth.
Nay.
Ms. Frank.
Nay.
Ms. Ellis.
Nay.
Dr. Tobin.
Nay.
It's 2 in the affirmative and 6 in the negative. Motion fails.
Okay, Ms. Schallheim.
Okay, so it's since been clarified to me that I can do the rest of these in mass, so that's what we're going to do. I will leave some of the technical bits for Ms. Wilson to final, like, I'm not going to read the related entries part, with all the related policies up at the top, because I don't really recall what I added, what was taken away, so I don't want to get that confused. So I'll just start with the title. So the new title, this would then be Display of Flags. So I move to do these following amendments: to change the title of this policy from Display of Flags to Display of Flags and Decorations, to amend the issues section to then read, "The board is committed to honoring the flag of the United States of America as a symbol of this country's national ideals and pride. In accordance with state law, policy IKA, and regulation IKA-RA, opening and patriotic exercises govern the display, care, and custody of the American flag at each AACPS school and classroom. The board is also committed to ensuring that all AACPS students, employees, visitors, and volunteers feel safe and included on board property and in AACPS facilities. Accordingly, the board acknowledges student, employee, visitor, and volunteer self-expression via the display of flags and decorations in accordance with state and federal and state laws and AACPS policies and regulations," then striking the rest of the issue section, which includes the sentences, "The board also promotes the display of the Maryland state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis city flag, in addition to the display of the American flag, except for flags that promote national, state, and government and local government pride. The display of flags on board property and in AACPS should be limited to those with bona fide educational purposes." So that bit would be struck. Under position, leaving position 1, the definition of the flag the same, adding another point, a decoration is something that adorns, enriches, or enhances, including figures, magnets, stickers, pins, posters, and wall decor. Student work does not constitute a decoration. Adding another section, the display of flags, or actually no, this is amending the next section. The display, to then read, the display of flags or decorations promoting the views of any past, present, or future partisan organization, political party, or candidate as defined in Maryland education law on board property and in any AACPS facility while schools are in session, except as permitted in curriculum or in accordance with AACPS policies and regulation, including policies IKB, programs, meetings, and events with elected officials and political candidates, JCK, student and political activity, and JCL, student organizations, and their corresponding regulations, must have the prior approval of the superintendent or superintendent's designee in advance of such display, then striking the phrasing of the Maryland state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and the Annapolis City flag are encouraged wherever appropriate and practicable. Adding another section, the board acknowledges employee self-expression via the display of flags and decorations on board property and AACPS facilities, including in schools, classrooms, and workspaces in accordance with federal and state laws and AACPS policies and regulations, including policies IKB, programs, meetings, and events with elected officials and political candidates, JCK, student political activity, and JCL, student organizations and their corresponding regulations. Adding another section, notwithstanding any other provisions in this policy, the board promotes the right of self-expression of individual AACPS students, employees, visitors, and volunteers in their attire, personal appearance, or what they display on their person or personal belongings, provided such expression or display does not violate federal and state laws and AACPS policies and regulations, including policy AC, non-discrimination, policy JCD, student attire and personal appearance, policy JCDA, student uniforms and their corresponding regulations. An actual flag as defined may not be worn as an article of clothing. Then also striking the last two parts of that section. So I'm moving to strike the next two sentences. The display of flags other than the American flag, Maryland flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag shall be limited to flags with a bona fide educational purpose, and also striking the sentence, a school principal or principal's designee shall determine what constitutes a bona fide educational purpose for the display of a flag. My amendments also update the legal references at the bottom, and that's in total my amendments.
Okay. So that is a motion, correct?
It is.
Ms. Schallheim? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, Ms. Frank?
I thought we were going round robin.
I will do round robin. I was just seeing if anybody opt to the, okay, Ms. Corkadell.
I will not be supporting this.
Okay. I will not take you, Ms. Schallheim, because we'll come back to you as the motion maker. Ms. Dent?
No comment.
Mr. McGrath?
No comment.
Mr. Silkwood?
No comment.
Ms. Frank?
I definitely have comments. This amendment pulls out all of the references to the government flags that represent our state, county, and references to instructional use, but encourages self-expression. Are we educating students or giving an ideological platform? Are we encouraging education or expression with this amendment? With the recent proficiency scores, I think we should focus more on the educational aspect of the Board of Education. I find it,
That's a disruption. Ladies and gentlemen, please.
I find it hypocritical that we want to enshrine in policy that we encourage expression when our own constituents can't freely comment to this board without being interrupted for the measly 2 minutes they are allotted. It is a sad parody of democracy to encourage free speech for some while shutting down the folks who pay for this building and every wall where these flags would be hung.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Ms. Ellis, did I see a light from you? Okay, all right. Is there any need to go around again? No. Okay. Ms. Schulheim?
I never thought this policy was worth the time in committee nor the paper it's printed on, but if we're going to scurry down a rabbit hole, we might as well make it an enabling policy and not a restrictive one, and that's what I'm aiming to do. It doesn't restrict the display of the Maryland flag, Anne Arundel County flag, or Annapolis City flag, but basically continues with the status quo. I've heard a lot about wanting politics out of our classrooms, and so I took from Maryland state law a way to do that and a definition of what it means to be a political organization or a political party. You want the politics out, that's the way to do it. So that's why I brought these amendments, and I look for my colleagues' support. And if not, we'll see how the vote comes down third reader, shall we?
All right. Thank you, Ms. Schulheim. All right. Ms. Howell, I think we're ready for a vote.
Ms. Corkadell?
No.
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Nay.
Mr. McGrath?
Nay.
Mr. Silkworth?
Nay.
Ms. Frank?
Nay.
Ms. Ellis?
Nay.
Dr. Tobin?
Nay.
1 in the affirmative, 8 in the negative, motion
7.
fails. I'm sorry, 7. 1, 7, motion fails.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have some general comments if you're.
Okay, well, let's go around again if there are additional. Ms. Corkadell?
I will be making final comments during the third reader, and I'm continuing to listen to everyone. But I am just going to say that vigorous discourse and debate is appropriate, and that can be a very good telling lesson as someone who was on the debate team. In one of my past lives, I got to say that there's a lot of good educational lessons to be learned. But when we deviate from decency and respect as human beings to human beings, to feel the need to disrupt, can be viewed as intimidation. And the lack of civility while we debate the American flag, I am very, very disappointed. Our students need to see adults that can respect one another, can disagree with one another, without feeling the need to come to such simplistic terms as interruptions and displays of vocals, not necessarily of words, to try to intimidate. This is not what our students should be seeing. And although I've heard from every single side on about the flags, what I've also heard is concern about being able to come to a board meeting and do so safely. And so I hope as we continue to work through this proposal that we can maybe reassess how we act in public, how we treat one another, and consider for a minute that civility is not just an option, but is necessary for true peace and compassion with one another as human beings to human beings. And I'm just not seeing enough of that these days. I hope we can change the tide at some point.
Thank you. Ms. Shulhan?
Yes, I definitely have some more comments to make. So, I kind of knew where the amendments were going to go, but I had to give it the honest effort to try to make the policy better. Even if it's putting lipstick on a pig. But I offer the following. So after listening to the commentary during the last two meetings, this meeting, the media coverage on this topic to District 5 constituents, as well as to the broader community from every corner of the county over the past 30 days, I offer the following. While we are all Americans, I would argue that all of us are more than the stars and stripes. We are a country of immigrants. Unless you are an indigenous person, you came here from somewhere else at some point in the past. Some of our ancestors came to America to escape horrors elsewhere. Many were forced to come here. Some traveled here willingly. These are facts and part of our history of this country. For some, our flag is a sign of hopes, dreams, and ideals. For others, it's a reminder that we have a long way to go in terms of equality in this country. And for all of us, it's part of who we are, but not all of who we are. Is our flag viewed as a symbol of freedom? Yes, and so it's confounding that we are talking about limiting freedoms with this draft policy. Freedom of speech and expression are First Amendment rights, rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, rights that our soldiers fought and died to obtain for all of us. As we've heard from Dr. Bedell and others, every child needs to feel that they belong so that they can grow and succeed. A move to silence huge groups of students who are so much more than Americans and just want to be seen, heard, and feel a sense of belonging and feel welcomed at their school. Not told that pieces of them don't fit into the narrow boxes outlined in this draft policy and are not fully welcomed just as they are in their school. Remember, this policy is not about adults. It's about our students. It's about their experience, not yours. It's about how they feel. This policy, if it, God forbid, passes, will hurt children, teachers, and staff. Instead of being concerned with the physical safety and mental health of all students, the spin is that this is about a group that it's just about a group that has never been marginalized or othered at the expense of others. The stripping of rights of most under the guise of protecting others. Coded language. The use of religion to discriminate against others. Regardless of the hurdles unnecessarily thrown in our students' way, no policy, however cruel, will make Black and brown, LGBTQ+, and students with disabilities disappear. You cannot take away their humanity, so you can pretend they don't deserve to be full members of their schools or that they don't exist. Remember that policy IKA and regulation IKA-RA opening and patriotic exercises govern the display, care, and custody of the American flag at each AACPS school and in each classroom, and it was just passed 8-0 this evening. This policy works to ban in a similar way to other places in this state and country all other flags under the false flag of patriotism, politics, and religion. As we have learned from public testimony since first reader, this is about banning pride and Black Lives Matter flags, full stop. But draft policy IS does more than that. It also bans military flags, JROTC flags, college pennants, sports flags. Those will all disappear. Elevate all students, eliminate all gaps. Let's look through the MABE equity lens at this restrictive policy and see if it others groups of students, staff, and teachers. Yes, it absolutely does. Military students, teachers, and staff. Students, teachers, and staff with disabilities. Black and brown students, teachers, and staff. Those whose country of origin is outside the U.S., and yes, also LGBTQ plus students, teachers, and staff. Additionally, this policy as written would place a huge burden on our administrators. And we've just heard from two of our bargaining groups about this, and they're both opposed, including the one that represents our administrators. Are we really going to put one more thing on their plates, really, and in an economy where we have shortages in every corner of the school system? So now on top of the endless tasks that administrators would already manage, now they'll have to make decisions that inevitably include fielding phone calls and emails from parents about flags. I'm not willing to put this task on their shoulders. And remember, it'll be 127 different definitions in addition to all the other AACPS facilities in the Parham building of what is considered a bona fide educational purpose. And in other words, no consistency across schools and facilities. And what about the tension that this will inevitably create between teachers and administrators who want to display, teachers who want to display a flag of inclusion and love, such as the pride flag, and their administrator disagrees? Talk about opening a wholly unnecessary can of worms. We have a republic if we can keep it, unless substantially amended between now and the final vote on July 12th. I am a no. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dent.
First of all, I want to say, I think at the last meeting I encouraged comments. I still stand by that. But I want to say that at my core, I've always and will always strive to foster an inclusive and respectful environment, not only just for the faculty, but for our students. I can tell you that after reading through, and no, Dr. Tobin, I did not read through all 1,600 comments, but after reading through so many of the comments, I'm lost for words at how hurtful, how painful, at the same time, how encouraging the freedom of expression has occurred. And that is called democracy. So I think that for me, even as we sit here this afternoon and everybody is here this late hour, it tells me the importance of this. So Ms. Schallheim, I appreciate you taking the due diligence to add your comments, to take the due diligence to make sure the policy means what it does to you and for the people that you represent. I too have taken meetings from stakeholders, more than 17 meetings from stakeholders that want to talk about the policy, where the directions of the policy is going, and what the policy means and what it doesn't mean. What I will tell you is that the public school system is a place of education. And for me, that doesn't mean limiting education. It means that the national flag should not be a consideration of whether it's being displayed or not. I, for one, have served this country 28 years, and I won't ever stand here and tell you that our national flag is at risk of not being displayed. I will also tell you that that flag represents everybody under that flag. That does not in no means means that I don't think that any other flag of any other culture, any other race, any other history, and historical events should not be displayed. But I will tell you that I want to be at a place to where the American flag represents all. And I'd say this as a black person standing here, that I don't feel like an immigrant in the United States of America. I am not going to say that as a person of color, that somehow or another, the flag, this policy somehow or another negates that Black Lives Matter doesn't matter. It still does matter. That the Pride community, LGBTQIA+ community doesn't matter. I see the passion in the room of what it means. But I will tell you that the policy directs a whole lot more than that. The policy was stricken, and the strive for that, for me, was to foster an environment that was inclusive. And somehow or another, it's became very divisive. It hasn't brought together anything other than a lot more divisive. And it saddens me that Anne Arundel County public cannot come together. And please provide me comments that brings things together, not things that continue to separate. It has become very, very, very hard for me to decide which direction to go, I just want to throw my hands up in the air and say, why do we have the policy in the beginning? I asked that question over and over again. After sitting here reading through so many comments, I know why we have the policy. Because why you all are in the room tonight. That's why we have the policy. Because there's so many people that walks the hall of Anne Arundel County Public Schools that don't feel represented, that feel underrepresented, that feel afraid to speak. And it's not just on the Pride and on the Pride and Black Lives Matter community. There are others that are sitting on Make America, or the Make America Great Again flag. They don't feel represented either. So the flag needs to be, the policy needs to be inclusive. And I don't know if there's a way, and I'm not going to promise you, and I won't promise you something I can't deliver. That's for officers to do, sir. Okay? I mean this in wholeheartedly, that we have to find a way to work together, to be here together so that all students feel inclusive. And if this policy is this divisive, then I think the policy needs to not only be re-evaluated, but I think the policy is not a policy that needs to stand here in Anne Arundel County. Thank you.
Mr. McGrath.
When I previously spoke on this matter, I wanted to stress the importance of respect to my upbringing and why I opposed the policy. I want to say that I respect everyone here today because they came for what they believed in, and I just want to say that people of faith have come here today, and I respect that. But what unifies all Abrahamic religions, I respect my Muslim brothers and sisters who have come out here today, is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself said that none of you truly believe until you love your brother as well, what you want for him. And I think while you may disagree with me when I believe that the Pride flag and Black Lives Matter flag is important and it helps our students, we need to believe our other community members. We need to love them. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, there's a difference between liking your brother and loving your brother. You don't have to like them, you have to love them. And I feel that loving your brother includes giving this support to our community members. I respect you. I disagree with you on this matter, but I understand. I'm just saying that I need to love my fellow community member, and I think to love your fellow community member would be to oppose this policy, but I have no hate for anyone here.
Thank you. Mr. Silkworth.
Oh, Zach, you are such a tough act to follow. Isn't it, Tanisha? I hadn't planned on making some of the comments that I may make right now. The first thing I want to do is respond to Ms. Dent. I did read all of the emails, 1,600. It's almost 300 pages. I read every single one. And actually there were some heart-wrenching stories in those emails. I'm going to say to each and every person in this room tonight, I respect each and every one of you for your caring enough and for your willingness to come out tonight or send your emails to advocate for your beliefs. I just want to make a few comments about, I taught for a few years, and I've said this to several of my colleagues over the past couple weeks. I have been so encouraged. I went to 13 graduations, and we talk about respect for not just for that great American flag. And by the way, I spent 6 years in the military, so I have the utmost respect for that. As I watched our students in graduation showing respect not only for the flag when we had our national anthem or the pledge, but also for one another as they honored one another as they walked across the stage. It was amazing. I've had the privilege over my career to be an announcer. Nobody has seen the respect in Anne Arundel County Public Schools and amongst our Anne Arundel County students than I have. At the beginning of every athletic event or other events that I've announced, I always make the statement, ladies and gentlemen, please rise and remove your headgear as we honor America with the playing of our national anthem. As I looked out at everyone in the stadium, everyone is standing facing the flag and their hands over their heart. Students, people in the crowd, everyone. I taught for a long time. And I will tell you that you all know me. It's a relationship. I'm a relationship guy. The first couple of weeks was always about relationships. And we've had this rule about the Pledge of Allegiance in our schools for a long time. And there were times when I had some students that I didn't think that they were showing the respect for that flag that I thought that they should. I didn't yell and scream and holler at them. What I did do was I let them watch a video of Red Skelton. Now that kind of dates me. Red Skelton. He did a video in his TV show, and in that he speaks to the students of America, and he says, let me tell you about the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I suggest that everybody go out on YouTube and take a look at that, because I will tell you that every time I did that, not one student in my classroom would continue to sit down. They would stand up, and they would respect our American flag. I also think about, what if I were to decide to retire and be a rehirer? Well, if I did, I couldn't go back and be the same guy I was, because first thing I ever did was to put the United States American flag and the Maryland flag in my room. Every single year, first thing I did. But I also put other flags, French-speaking country flags, Spanish-speaking country flags. But I also had other things up on my wall. I had other posters and whatever. For instance, I knew that my students needed to know if they were in crisis, they needed to know what to do. So we had this big poster that had a hotline number for them. They also saw this big bully blocker poster that I had up on my wall. I was a bully blocker, and no one that I knew in my class was either going to be a bully or was going to be subjected to bullies. My students knew, based upon the relationship that I built with them, that they were in a safe place. I've been a good listener. I'm going to continue to be a good listener. I've read the 1,600 emails, and I really want our focus to be on student outcomes. That's where we should be. We're not here to vote the policy tonight, and I will continue to be a good listener, but at this point in time, I will probably not be supporting this policy.
Thank you. Ms. Frank?
Yes, I have some amendments that I would like to submit. I've sent them to Ms. Howell. Ms. Howell, could you please send out amendment number 1? Under position, Article C, I add a number 5, which is actually the very similar language as Ms. Schalheim had. So I am going to move that we add item number 5. Nothing in this policy is intended nor shall be construed to limit the right of any individual AACPS employee, student, volunteer, or visitor to adorn their person or personal belongings with such items as buttons, pins, clothing designs, or jewelry that may incorporate a flag or flag-like design, provided such an item does not violate state law or board policy, including, but not limited to, Policy JCD, student attire and personal appearances, Policy JCDA, student uniforms, and their corresponding regulations.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will go around. Ms. Corkadell?
Regardless of my vote on the final, I do believe that it's important for us to listen to the folks, and as Ms. Frank is the person who asked for this policy draft to come before us, seeing that she is being responsive to that, compels me to support this amendment at this time. And I believe it solves some of and clarifies some of the points of contention that some have raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schulman?
Yes, this was very similar to one of the ones that I wanted, but to be honest, without the entire package that I provided, I can't support this nor the policy as it is before us, and so I'm a no.
Thank you. Ms. Dent?
Ms. Frank, could you clarify where this is going for me? I thought is it in?
This clarifies, there were some concerns about First Amendment. So we already have policy that regulates what students are, or students, employees, visitors, et cetera, anyone in the building is or is not allowed to wear. So this is just a clarifying piece of policy to explain that the main policy does not affect these items because they are already outlined in policy.
Thank you.
Mr. McGrath?
No comments or questions at this time.
Mr. Silkworth?
No comments.
I will skip over you, Ms. Frank. Ms. Ellis?
I just feel it does sort of clear up some concerns, so I'll support.
Okay. So I think we've addressed the questions and comments. So if that's the case, then Ms. Frank?
Yes, we had a significant amount of public comment, and even before the public comment, we got a lot of emails, and one of the major concerns that was sent to us and explained to us was the concerns about First Amendment and freedom of speech. This policy does not interfere with personal freedom of speech, but because I'm trying to be reactive to the concerns of the public, I do believe that expressing that this has nothing to do with your personal freedom of speech is very important in this policy.
Okay, thank you. So I believe we're ready to vote.
Ms. Frank moved to amend Section C, position, and add number 5. Nothing in this policy is intended nor shall be construed to limit the right of any individual, AACPS employee, student, volunteer, or visitor to adorn their person or personal belongings with such items as buttons, pins, clothing, designs, or jewelry that may incorporate a flag or flag-like design, provided such an item does not violate state law or board policy, including but not limited to Policy JCD, Student Attire and Personal Appearance, Policy JCDA, Student Uniforms, and their corresponding regulations. Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schulhan?
Nay.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. McGrath?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Nay.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Nay.
5 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
I
Frank,
have-
do you have additional?
I have additional amendments. Ms. Howell, could you please send the board amendment number 2? Thank you. I move to add the language, in addition to the display of the American flag as required by state law and AACPS Board Policy IKA, to the next piece of number 2, which is the display of the Maryland state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag are encouraged wherever appropriate and practicable.
Okay, so that's your motion, Ms. Frank?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a second?
at the language.
All right, I will go around. Ms. Corkadell.
This appears to be a technical cleanup, and so I will be supporting it.
Ms. Shawhan.
I don't support the policy, nor will I support this.
Ms. Dent. Mr. McGrath.
No comment.
Mr. Silkworth.
No comment.
Ms. Ellis. Okay. Ms. Frank, would you like to add any additional comments?
This was introduced to clarify and to also revert back to the main purpose of this, which is that there is a standing board policy which explains the patriotic exercises, and that this is also, this policy dovetails with Maryland state law.
Okay. Ms. Howell, I think we're ready to vote.
Ms. Frank moved to amend Section C, position number 2. In addition to the display of the American flag as required by Maryland law and AACPS Board Policy IKA, the display of the Maryland state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag are encouraged wherever appropriate and practicable. Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Nay.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. McGrath?
Nay.
Mr. Silkworth?
Nay.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Nay.
4-4, motion fails.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Frank, do you have additional amendments?
Ms. Howell, could you please send Amendment 3? I move to add to number 3, the display of flags other than the American flag, Maryland flag, and Anne Arundel County flag and City of Annapolis flag shall be limited to add the language or flag-like banners with a bona fide educational purpose, and then add including but not limited to flags of other nations, flags or banners that denote a recognition of school achievement such as Blue Ribbon School, Green School, PBIS School, etc., and MPSSAA, or similar sport tournament banners recognizing the participation or accomplishments of an AACPS school team.
Okay, so
Second.
that is, we have a second. All right. So we will go around. Ms. Corkadell.
Again, as with the First Amendment being proposed by Ms. Frank, I do believe it is being responsive to some of the concerns that have come before us. And so I will be supporting it.
Ms. Schallheim.
And yet military flags still off the table, pride flags, obvious reason for this policy to begin with, Black Lives Matter flags. I mean, at least we're saying the quiet part out loud, I guess, but I'm a no on this policy amendment and the whole policy.
Ms. Dent.
So I appreciate Ms. Frank working to try to get this to a amendment that would try to represent some of the comments. I still think that this amendment needs some work so that it's a little bit more, or a lot more inclusive. So I won't be supporting this amendment because I think it needs a lot more work. Thank you.
Mr. McGrath.
I concur with the statements of Ms. Dent and Ms. Schallheim.
Mr. Silkworth.
No comment.
Ms. Ellis.
Only that the amendments I've seen so far are clarifying the policy before us, so I'll support it.
I will say, in some sense, an amendment like this adds to my concern about this policy because it articulates further a particular set of flags that we would support and some that we would not, outside of what is already in our other policies. So I will not be in support of this. Ms. Frank.
Yes, the purpose of this policy was to denote but not limiting what a bona fide educational purpose was, as the public had many concerns over what that would be. This outlines some of those potential flags that would be flown. To Ms. Schalheim's point, no, there are certain flags not included, and one of those would be the pro-life flag, which I would love to see in certain classrooms, but that was not included either. Flags of other nations, however, is included, and as we've had many concerns about French flags in French class or Spanish flags in Spanish class, I thought that this was a very relevant policy to bring before this board. This board is not debating the main motion. This board is debating only the amendments. I also believe that accomplishments that are in recognition of achievement contribute to an educational purpose. So I included all of those because the point of this amendment is about education. It is not about expression. It is about what is included in an educational situation. So that is the purpose of this amendment.
All right, thank you. I think that concludes the comments on this amendment. So, Ms. Howell, I think we're ready to vote.
Ms. Frank moved to amend Section C, position number 3. The display of flags other than the American flag, Maryland flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag shall be limited to flags or flag-like banners with a bona fide educational purpose, including but not limited to flags of other nations, flags or banners that denote a recognition of school achievement such as Blue Ribbon School, Green School, PBIS School, etc., and MPSSAA or similar sport tournament banners recognizing the participation or accomplishments of an AACPS school team. Ms. Ms. Corkadell.
Aye.
Ms. Schalheim.
Nay.
Ms. Dent. Mr. McGrath.
Nay.
Mr. Silkworth.
Nay.
Ms. Frank.
Aye.
Ms. Ellis.
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Nay.
3-5, motion fails.
Ms. Howell, did I send you an amendment 4? I move to add amendments to the issue portion of this proposed policy to read, "The board is committed to honoring the flag of the United States of America, add as a proud and patriotic symbol back to this of this country's national ideals, add including freedom and democracy, strike and pride. Policy IKA and Regulation IKA-RA, opening patriotic exercises, govern the display, care, and custody of the American flag at each AACPS public school and in each classroom. Add, in accordance with Maryland law, in addition to the display of the American flag, comma, or period, and then create uppercase T. The board also add supports, strike promotes, the display of the Maryland state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag, strike in addition to the display of the American flag. Except for strike flags that promote, add the previously noted national, state, and local government, strike pride, add flags. The display of flags on board property and in AACPS shall be limited to those with a bona fide educational purpose."
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Corkadell.
Again, I think it's providing more clarity in the language and will be supporting it. However, I am going to say, when a member is speaking, the continual disruptions that I just saw displayed against Ms. Frank and now against myself is exactly what I think everybody was referring to. including the little snippets. We are here to conduct a business meeting respectfully, and regardless of how you feel about this policy, especially, I have not stated an opinion on this yet, but I am growing very concerned that this is turning more into a personal show than it is actually a debate and deliberation for our business meetings. Now, I thought we were pretty clear at the beginning of the meeting, Dr. Tobin, that this behavior will not be tolerated. And as the evening has progressed, so has the disruptions. I hope, moving forward, that we will be properly presided over so that we can continue uninterrupted to deliberate, whether it's from a member or someone observing our meetings. I don't find that respectful, and I don't believe that is what we as AACPS as a family are all about. Please, folks, we're all human beings here, and how long do you want the meeting? Because I'll just keep on reiterating myself every time I'm interrupted, reminding everyone that this is not appropriate debate. If you're called upon to speak, then you speak.
Ms. Scholheim.
Yeah, just like the others, I'm against the entire policy and this amendment, and will be voting no.
Ms. Dent. Mr. McGrath.
No comment.
Mr. Silkworth.
No comment.
Ms. Ellis.
Just that this doesn't clarify things for me, so I'm not going to support this particular amendment.
Okay. Ms. Frank.
There were a couple of areas where there's some technical amendments. I would still like to, if this amendment fails, include the technical amendment. And other than that, again, the purpose, some of the amendments, including freedom and democracy, they're intended to tie the policy back to what the purpose of the policy is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to vote. Ms. Howell.
Ms. Frank moved to amend Section B, issue. The board is committed to honoring the flag of the United States of America as a proud and patriotic symbol of this country's national ideals, including freedom and democracy. Policy IKA and Regulation IKA-RA, opening and patriotic exercises, govern the display, care, and custody of the American flag at each AACPS public school and in each classroom in accordance with the Maryland law. In addition to the display of the American flag, the board also supports the display of the American state flag, Anne Arundel County flag, and Annapolis City flag, except for the previously noted national, state, and local government flags. The display of flags on board property and in AACPS shall be limited to those with a bona fide educational purpose. Ms. Corkadell.
Aye.
Ms. Scholheim.
Nay.
Ms. Dent? Mr. McGrath?
Nay.
Mr. Silkworth?
Nay.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Nay.
Dr. Tobin?
Nay.
2 in the affirmative, 6 in the negative, motion fails.
And I have one final amendment to offer. I would like to strike under position number 4, a school principal or principal's designee shall be authorized to determine when necessary what constitutes a bona fide education purpose for the display of a flag, subject to the guidance of AACPS legal office or other officials in the superintendent's office on any issues that may arise concerning this policy.
Second.
All right. Are we going to be receiving that one, Ms. Howell? Is that, okay, that's just read, okay. So, Ms. Corkadell.
Again, supporting for technical purposes I think is appropriate, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Ms. Scholheim.
Yeah, this doesn't get me here, just like the rest. A no on this amendment and a no on the policy.
Ms. Dent. Mr. McGrath.
No comment.
Mr. Silkworth.
No comment.
Ms. Ellis.
Yeah, I would support this because I believe if a policy is to pass, it's up to the superintendent to implement it. So.
Okay. Ms. Frank?
The purpose of this was to be reflective of some of the concerns that were brought specifically by some of our principal bargaining units, and to give Dr. Bedell the maximum flexibility that he could in developing regulations. Whether you are planning to vote for the main motion or not, I would also remind you that making this policy the best policy moving forward is prudent for a body. So even if you do not support the main motion, if you believe that there are specific problems within the policy, I do believe that it is incumbent upon you to support those amendments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I believe we're ready to vote. Ms. Howell?
Ms. Frank, can you repeat your motion, please?
To strike number 4 under C position.
Thank you. Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Wait, point of order. What was it to strike the whole of 4? I thought it added language too. Did it not?
You strike it.
Yeah.
Strike it. She said strike it. Yeah, it says strike.
Yeah, that wasn't emailed to us, so I don't have it in front of me, but I don't think anything's going to get me there. Nay.
Ms. Dent?
Yay.
Mr. McGrath?
Nay.
Mr. Soakworth?
Nay.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Nay.
I'm sorry. 4-4 motion fails.
Ms. Frank, do you have any additional?
Comments. We're in the comment portion now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have no more amendments, unless something just came through. No, okay. I have no more amendments, but I do have some things that I would like to discuss as well. First of all, there was a lot of public comment, and it took a very long time to get through it, and I still have some pieces of comment that I want to go through and pull, but I will be discussing that in a moment. We heard a lot from the public discussing the Trevor Project and some of the mental health statistics that the Trevor Project is citing. So I wanted to see what that was and dig into that. The Trevor Project's statistics are an online survey which self-reported and was meant for people 14 to 24, but there is no validity on who answers those questions. As a 100-question survey, it is more likely that casual surveillance would not be included in the final tally. And it is a clear bias due to the self-selection by individuals who have negative experiences. The content and methodology on the mental health of LGBTQ participants was reviewed by an independent institutional review board. The two main roles of IRBs are providing an independent evaluation that proposed research that is ethically acceptable. The second is evaluating compliance with regulations and laws designed to protect human subjects. Let me be clear. This does not in any way mean that these numbers are valid. It only means that they were reviewed and have been conducted in a manner that was not unethical or unsafe. There was another comment that used the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and this comment stated that this organization put out a map of condensed suicides per state, so that you would have all of the country, or all of the states of the country would have a suicide map. So if there were more suicides in one state than another, that would be denoted upon this map. Being very politically savvy and understanding how the breakdown of red versus blue states looks on a map, the comment was that suicides were condensed in red states. I can tell you, being somewhat of an expert in this field, that is not true. If you look at Oregon, which is in a very high determinant of suicides, They are not a red state. If you look at Texas and Florida, which are at the lower end of the suicides, those are both red states in any metric that you look at. And Nebraska is also in the middle range, and they are extremely red. So some of the data that we have been provided is incorrect. I would like to clear the record on that point. Some folks have stated that they represent brown and black or LGBTQ people. I can assure you that no one in this room represents everyone else. You cannot speak for an entire community. I travel the state, and now I travel the country, working with conservative, black and brown and minorities. I traveled the country working with people of a myriad of different expressions and sexualities. And there is no one in this room who represents all of those people. We got an email today from a friend who tried to enter into public comment, and he represents a conservative statewide organization. And his viewpoints were very clearly outlined that the pride movements and the pride flags represent an ideology. They do not represent a people. And I'm going to reiterate that point over and over and over. It is not hate for a people to disagree with an ideology. It is not a dislike of other human beings to not want to be exposed to other people's ideology. There has been quite a bit of talk about hate the last couple of weeks. As I went through the 200 and something pages, I pulled the hateful comments about people who are supporting this policy. And there are pages and pages and pages, and I think I'm at 12 pages of hateful, divisive, and horrendous comments. When we say things like children are watching, children have computers too. So when public comment was submitted and there were thousands of comments and pages upon pages of hateful, divisive rhetoric against people who would support this policy, it is unacceptable for adults to do that. So I'm going to read to you some of these hateful, divisive comments, and you can let me know if this is okay. This is such a silly matter, but it's a slippery slope, and I'm worried about what will come next as extremist and hate groups such as Moms of Liberty get a foothold in our society and now in our country. Public schools fall into the Moms of Liberty step 1 of the Nazi playbook to ban flags in public classrooms. Rainbow flags are not hate flags. This policy is nothing more than a political maneuver by those on the right who are doing anything possible to suppress support for groups with which they disagree, as they lose their long-held power over marginalized groups, including people of color, women, members of the LGBTQIA community, and members of non-Christian faiths. People in support of this policy are shrewdly attempting to enlist the government in their efforts to silence these voices through any means necessary. Ardent, right-wing individuals who fear that their grip on power may be slipping and who proclaim that their God commands them to hate their neighbors suffer no harm at the sight of a pride flag. I would invite that individual to come into this room and see the rainbow of colors that we have tonight, who are not all white Christian nationalists. This is an obvious ploy to give hate groups a foothold, to further influence control the environment, to prevent erosion of their perceived power over targeted groups. This is a dangerous and hateful turn of policy, as it has no place in our schools which celebrate all of our students. LGBTQ individuals are under threat politically and socially in our country, and giving into hate groups such as Moms for Liberty opens the door for further repression and bigotry. It is cowardly to appease terrorists. Right now, there is a foolish, rude, and violent backlash against CRT, against LGBTQ rights. The people who propose this idea of banning flags, but state and federal flags, don't want black students to feel empowered. They don't want queer students to exist or be visible. In short, the proponents of this initiative are bigots and terrorists. You don't negotiate with terrorists. both because it is morally repugnant and because it will never ever truly appease them. If you give an inch, they'll ask for more aggressive bans later. Don't start helping the first step of white nationalism and Christo-fascism. This proposed policy is nothing short of schoolyard bullying. There is a wave of bigotry and hate going around in our country, especially targeting the LGBTQ plus community, and I don't want it, and I don't want AACPS to be any part of it. We have a word for people who want to limit freedom of speech, thought, and expression for others, and the word is fascists, who are fundamentally undemocratic and anti-American. The proposed policy is a naked attempt by fascists to harm our LGBTQ plus and our black and brown neighbors. Fascists have no place making laws in Anne Arundel County. The constant barrage of anti-gay sentiment is damaging our children and communities. Maybe stop taking any suggestions, such as one by a group who has been labeled as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Accepting it will crack the door to fascism, white nationalism, and hate. Just because those proposing the policy seem innocuous, they are truly nefarious and members of a recognized hate group bent on taking over schools to dictate what can be taught, what can be read, and damaging our children. Reject this policy and reject hate. It goes on and on and on and on for pages. I could sit here and read you all of the pages, but we wouldn't get out of here until past God knows when. There's another quote that says that it is nothing more than a stepping stone for the hate group Moms for Liberty to get into our schools and dictate policies to reflect their beliefs. That was sent dozens upon dozens of times, that exact quote. I believe I was up to 48 when I stopped being able to copy and paste. Public comment is part of the public record. The people who oppose this policy have said that it is because these flags promote kindness, acceptance, and inclusion. Please tell me how these viewpoints lead to a more kind, accepting, and inclusive community. In fact, reading through these divisive comments was incredibly difficult as an adult. Providing neutrality in ideology is the only way to create a safe space for all children in AACPS. This is the time to make our classrooms about instruction. If someone has religious beliefs that are offended, what is their recourse? And what is the process that this board suggests without enacting policy? America's public schools are the nurseries of democracy, and to dissent is the highest form of patriotism. Now please tell me how students who disagree with these ideological flags are expected to feel included or accepted if they dissent. If we were truly here for all students, then it includes those who may disagree with charged ideology. The only way to create actual inclusion is to stop forcing divisive ideology upon students.
Thank you.
I'm not finished.
Okay, Ms. Frank?
There was one comment that struck me that I wanted to include that I felt very positive. I am both an employee of AACPS and a resident of Anne Arundel County, and I wanted to briefly implore you to pass this proposed policy. I would argue that if those flags are the only things making students feel welcomed and safe in our buildings, we have a much deeper, more extensive work to do on all fronts. I think we sometimes hide behind flags, feeling as though posting them, we've done our part. I thought that that was incredibly touching, incredibly moving, and I wanted to share because I absolutely agree. I would like to close by saying some on this board have stated things like they are bully blockers, and I have just shown this board a great deal of bullying. Now what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Frank? Ms. Ellis, did you have additional comments?
I do have a statement to share this evening. And please bear with me, as this is likely the most difficult topic I will speak on, as I worry few will truly listen and hear me, and my words will likely be misconstrued by many. Indeed, even some close to me will likely misunderstand much of what I am about to say. But I must speak. If I move just a few people to thought, then my words will not go in vain. First, I want to thank the many members of our school community for engaging and sharing your thoughts on the proposed policy IS regarding this display of flags in the classroom. I have heard and read many thoughtful perspectives both in support and opposition of the proposed policy. My perspective evolves as I continue to gather information that will ultimately determine my vote on this policy. To those who don't know me, I see all people as individuals, and I see my responsibility to protect the individuality of every student and their freedom to develop their own thoughts and beliefs based on a rich curriculum and their own lived experience. In fact, I share the following quote from East of Eden, a work by John Steinbeck, when I speak at graduations. And this, I believe, that the free, exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for, the freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. And this I must fight against, any idea, religion, or government which limits or destroys the individual. This is what I am and I am about. So I'm going to get personal here for a moment, and this is where it gets really hard. There are many dearly beloved people in my life that identify along the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Some are family members, and many are close friends of my kids who I love like my own as I've watched them grow, and now many as adults. I support each and every one of them fully in their identity, feelings, and beliefs. I also have many people in my life who I love dearly that consider their deeply held religious and or philosophical beliefs to be significant to their own identity. Many families within our school system, within our school community, of varying faiths feel similarly. I also support each of them in their beliefs and know none of them to be hateful toward those who view the world differently. To disagree with someone is not to hate them. So let me share some of my thoughts and observations as we continue to discuss and consider this policy before its third reading and ultimate vote. First, as with any policy or important decision involving our students, I believe every member here is trying to do what is best for students, even when we disagree, and I'm truly disheartened by those who believe otherwise. Here is how I do read the proposed policy. What policy IS does not do is exclude anyone for any reason or make anyone feel like they do not belong. Policy IS appears to focus on our students' commonalities and creating a learning environment for all. This policy is not a denial of any student's rights or personhood, including the right to feel safe in the classroom. This policy seems intended to prevent imposing any ideology on our students, as the classroom wall is part of the school building. Perhaps most importantly, this policy as written does not prevent any student from expressing themselves, including on their clothing or property. I am a huge advocate for personal expression. I'm also very much in favor of student groups that provide the space for students to connect with those with shared experiences and beliefs. No one should feel alone in our school buildings. I have watched and listened carefully to the many comments we have received over the past few weeks, and know I have not nearly finished reading all 1,600, but you can believe before I vote, I will, of the most recent comments. I have also watched as a parent was intimidated in the boardroom while others tried to shut her voice out by intentionally coughing over her during her time to speak. I watched other parents being challenged by a member of the board during their time to speak as they tried to convey their feelings of not being heard or represented in the boardroom. I have heard my colleague called horrific names for bringing a concern to the board at the request of her constituents. Is this what diversity and inclusion looks like? One thing I've learned with certainty is that there is a huge amount of support among our school community for our LGBTQ plus students. While the amount of passion on display has led to some unfortunate incidents of intolerance of others, I am still so heartened that being a student with gender and or sexual differences is nothing like it was when I was in school, and these students have a tremendous and increasing support system. Here's the tricky part that I believe many find difficult. To disagree with the LGBTQ plus messaging in schools, on school walls, is not a rejection of LGBTQ plus students. To disagree with a message is not to hate the messenger. Many who are concerned about any type of messaging about sex and gender in the classroom can accept the idea of to each their own, live and let live. What many are concerned about is promoting any sort of ideas about gender or sexuality that go against their own beliefs. I will say again, to disagree with someone is not to hate them. I contend that putting up flags that challenge the religious beliefs of so many in our school community may actually be a violation of the separation of church and state. It is not our place or our right as a school system to impose ideas onto children as they are still developing and learning about who they are. As much as we all want to protect our most vulnerable students, it is not in our purview as a state agency to raise them. We need to be partners with our parents, all of them, not some self-imposed moral authority. No doubt, ignorance still exists, and there are still those who wish to impose their own beliefs on others. But the best way to counter ignorance is to model true inclusivity. This means ensuring every student, no matter their identity or background, is included. By treating every student with dignity and making each student feel valued as all work toward the common goal of learning, it is students' similarities that become the focus, not their differences. Yes, differences should be valued, and that is how we learn from each other when the circumstances allow. The classroom should be a place of neutrality for ideas to be developed and expressed, not forced upon students. I am positive this will contribute much more toward the worldview that many are seeking than any type of identifying flag that lifts some up while making others feel left out. Research shows a lower incidence of mental health issues for LGBTQ plus students. Sorry, that's right. Research shows a lower incidence of mental health issues for LGBTQ plus students when schools have policies in place supporting them. We have several policies with accompanying regulations to ensure students are respected and feel safe. Policy JCCA, bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, and intimidation, adopted June of 2009 and revised September of 2019. Policy JO, bias behavior and language, September 2019 was adopted. Policy JQ, safe and inclusive environments for LGBTQ plus students, adopted June of 2021. As stated in these policies, it is the board's expectation that they are enforced for all students. So I want to say specifically to our LGBTQ plus students, you belong. As long as you are true to yourself, you are not wrong. I want you to know you are loved and accepted, and most importantly, I want you to love yourself. Know your rights under our policies. If, for any reason, you do not feel safe, please reach out to a trusted adult. School system staff are trained and able to get you the help you need, whether it is reporting a bully, concerns outside of school, or just someone to talk to. AACPS is full of compassionate staff that care about you. I also supported the board's resolution stating that Black Lives Matter with my vote. I had a very thoughtful conversation with my colleague, Mr. Smith, around the language of this important resolution. This board and the school system have been relentless in our commitment to closing gaps and providing educational opportunities to lift our Black and brown students, and this is most recently demonstrated by this board's unanimous appointment of our superintendent, Mark Bedell. We still have work to do, and no one is more qualified and committed to ensuring every student feels seen in their classroom and in the curriculum than Dr. Bedell. The students I worry about are those that may not be seen or feel heard, who do not have a movement behind them. They exist throughout our school system from many different backgrounds and facing many different challenges. Let me be clear. I am not against flags as symbols representing individuals or the freedom of expression. Hang your flags on your cars, your homes, your businesses, wherever you feel it will make a difference for you. I just question whether our classroom walls, a place that needs to be safe for all students, is the right place. While I'm still listening and learning, I am certain that we need to do better to spread the message that every student belongs. Hearing parents and teachers tell us that students need flags in classrooms to feel safe makes me worry that certain students are being told that they should not feel safe. We need to change the narrative. We need to teach every student resilience and that it is okay for others to disagree with you, even to disapprove of your views and actions, even to dislike you. Believe it or not, many of our more socially conservative students do accept this truth every day in the classroom. The message should be true to yourself, respect our differences, and whenever possible, embrace them. Beyond that, let's teach reading, writing, and math. Let's provide every student the opportunity to learn in a safe and inclusive environment. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've done a round for comments. I've not yet had a chance to say my comments. Ms. Schalheim, I see you have another light. Well, no, you go ahead and then.
I'm just wondering out loud now what we could have done to support student achievement in the hours we've talked about this policy that, again, is a solution in search of a problem. I just wonder.
All right. Thank you. Are there any more comments before I would like to give mine, but anybody else have additional comments? There's been a lot to digest tonight. As Mr. Silkworth said, as we all know, we are only on the second reader of this. The vote on the policy does not happen tonight. I've explained my foundational concerns about the policy, but there's much to listen to and to absorb. First, I have read all 1,600 and whatever comments. I want to thank the community. I've read every one. I appreciate everyone because they all came from people who took the time to write them and to participate in this process. I've said before that I think the democratic process requires this of us, affords us the opportunity to do this. I've lived in many countries in my life where that's just not an option. And so I'm grateful that that opportunity exists here, and I'm especially grateful for the people who have taken the time to write to us and speak to us here about this issue. I will say, while I'm not a military brat, I'm a foreign service child. I was raised in the life of public service by a father who was a diplomat, who believed the power and difficulty of this country was precisely the fact that the U.S. flag didn't simply represent a homogeneous group. It was all that we are as a country, and that by its very definition, it included so many different communities that we all are a part of, that we choose to be a part of. And that's a whole lot simpler in some other countries in this world where you simply are what that flag tells you you are. That's not the case here. I also want to address something that came up in a lot of comments, both that we've heard here, I'm sure more that we will continue to hear, and many of the comments that came in on public comments in support of this policy kept referring to the word division. And Ms. Dent has spoken eloquently about the fact that certainly this policy has shown that there are a lot of divisions, but the reference that kept being made was to the fact that if we enable putting up these various banners and flags, that leads to division. And I do think, for the record, it's worth stating what the sources of division are and are not. Historically in this country and this community, division has been caused by race, racism, prejudice, and bigotry. The source of division is not those who are standing up for their humanity in the face of racism, prejudice, and bigotry. And I think it's worth remembering that, because the fact remains that while clearly it's evident we have a whole lot of work to do, there are groups of our students who don't just feel uncomfortable, they feel in danger. And that has certainly been articulated through the personal experiences that have been relayed to us by members of the LGBTQ plus community who are students or were students, and other groups who have written in to us. And so I think those are things that we have to remember. I will certainly be weighing that as I think this through. Finally, let me add one thing. We spend a lot of time making it clear through PDs and various other things that we urge our teachers to determine who is in their classroom and how to forge relationships with those students. I'm a old dinosaur of an academic. I've spent a lot of time reading people like Plato, who said you have to know your student. Otherwise, education is nothing. And I do question something that would take away the autonomy from our teachers when we have worked so hard to urge them to make those connections with their students, when that is what I think most of us remember from our school days. The teacher who saw us, I was an outsider for a whole bunch of reasons, and the teachers who saw me for who I was changed my life. And so I think that's something important. I trust our teachers. I really do. And I think, to Ms. Ellis's point, we all have the same goal in mind here. You see a lot of things, people feel very strongly about where they stand, but I assure you that there are 8 human beings sitting up here who are each doing what they believe to be the best and most compassionate thing for their community and their students and what they hear from their constituencies. We don't agree on the way to get there a lot of the time. But it doesn't mean that we aren't all human beings, just as everybody in this room is a human being and deserve to be seen as such. And so I've tried to maintain some order here tonight. I apologize if I missed some disruptive things. I will continue to try to do that, but I urge the public, again, to support the free and open exchange of these ideas, to recognize that this is a privilege that we have in this country that many people around the world would give their eye teeth to have, and that if we are going to preserve it, we have to do so by respecting the process, understanding that it's a valuable process. And remember that each of us at the end of the day are part of the same community, and at the end of the day, we're all going to have to live together. And we're all going to have to show our kids how to live together. And that's what this is about. So thank you. Thank you for the commentary. Thank you for being here tonight. I believe that will bring us to the next item. I think everybody has had a chance to have their comments.
Dr. Tobin, before we wrap up,
Yes.
I just want to point out that given the amendments that were made to this policy, it will be reposted through
Yes.
third reading on July 12th, when it will be back on before you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. So let's move on.